Welcome to Prize Fighters, Circus Freaks, and Gangsters. A podcast about the mayhem of the 19th century.
The blood jam of the 19th century.
Totally. I'm Greta.
And I'm Jamie.
And we are here to talk about Warrior Episode 7, The Tiger and the Fox. Before we get started, there's two things I just wanted to say. First of all, this episode contains suggestions of and a brief depiction of sexual assault, and we're going to be dealing with that. But also, second, this episode contains some big twists. So if you're watching the show and you want to see them before we tell you about them, go watch the episode. This is like the most spoilery episode we've done because this episode contains the most things to spoil, I think.
If they aren't watching the show by this point, I don't think they're going to.
It's true. But, you know, so like, oh, okay, I'll listen to it and then I'll go watch the show. Like, a lot of the other episodes, it didn't matter. But, yeah, this one, I think it matters.
And the show does actually start with a slave auction. It starts with a bang. This is a slap bang beginning. Honestly, like, I actually rewound it because I was like, what the hell am I looking at? Because I was kind of eating when and then I was like, what? They're in a darkened basement, and are they selling women? They're selling women.
They're selling women, yeah.
They're selling women.
We jumped over the cold open real quick because it sort of sets up that Long Z is like, I'm getting old, man, and it sucks. I used to be top dog, and everybody was afraid of me, and now I'm old and I hate it.
Yeah, he's old and fearful, and you can tell that Mai Ling detests him for being old and weak. Yes,
and she does that. Oh, it's okay, Grandpa. Just lie down, go to bed.
Yeah. She's like drugging him. So it's like Tyler Durden, and he's just drugging her so he can go out and like start fight clubs in different cities.
Yeah, definitely. But so that sort of sets up like, okay, you know, the power flip between Mai Ling and Long Z. Again, it's that roller coaster thing. We're tick, 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 ticking up to the top with that one.
Yeah, well, that one really has been hanging there the entire time. I feel like that one's more like one of those cliffhanger ones where you're up at the top and waiting for it to fall, and then you always think that it's broken, and oh shit, we're not going to fall. Now we're stuck up here for the rest, and then you drop.
Yeah.
That's kind of how this one feels to me.
Now, we're in a dark basement, and that struck you as like, what?
Yeah, it was, because everything else in the show is so well lit. Just the lighting itself, I was like, what the hell am I looking at? Why is it so dark?
I mean, I've obviously read different books than you as a kid and a teenager, and so I was like, oh, fuck, they're auctioning off Chinese girls who've been kidnapped and sold.
What the fuck books were you reading?
Oh, romance novels, duh.
Good Lord, Harlequin just broke your brain. No wonder you guys are always watching CSI and, like, the rape shows on TV.
We're mad and yelly about it because even though we knew this was fucked up, it was super duper in the air. And also you go to, back in the days before the internet, you'd go to the library, you'd go to the grocery store, you'd go to like Barnes and Noble, and the books for teen girls were just like that. That's what it was.
Just nothing but bodice rippers.
Yeah.
Well, we read very, very different books. Very, very different books.
But I think that makes this a way more fun show. So yeah, we're at the girl auction, and I mean, this was Mai Ling, Xiaojing, and Atoy's past, literally.
Yes. And when she identifies one of this woman from her hometown, she immediately goes to protect her, which I found interesting. It was almost like she knew the woman.
Right. I again, a little bit like Assam. He's like, ooh, your accent, this kind of hunger for home. And it's like, I know who you are in a certain way.
Yeah. I get their shared experience. I guess she really wants to protect her. I guess maybe so that woman doesn't have to go through what she went through.
Right. And there's a lot of interesting kind of, not dealing with shit, because there was also the girl who's like raised to be a concubine, but she was already sort of despoiled, and it's like Atoy's realizing like I don't want to just deal with this part of my past. I'm just gonna push it away and start over with the new girl.
And for me, I know that I must be coming at this from a really profound place of innocence, but the way, so just painting the picture for everybody who's not looking at this, they're showing the slave auction, and this guy is selling this girl who was raised to be a concubine from birth for this warlord, and so she's just raised for nothing but fucking. And then Atoy looks her over and kind of checks her face and stuff, and then lifts up her skirt and sees her legs are bruised, and then just is like, ugh, like it's bruised fruit. She's just like, ugh, get that the fuck away from me. And then is mad at this purveyor of goods for selling her this bruised fruit. It's not that, like, I don't know. I'm not comfortable with the amount of comfort the world has with rape, I guess.
Yeah, and there's so many layers there that I appreciated them for making explicit. There's some victim blaming, like, oh, hey, girl, why didn't you do something to defend yourself so you'd have a better sense when you're here? Atoy is also recognizing, but sort of passing over how much luck was involved in her getting where she was. And she's like, I just don't want to deal with unlucky people. It might rub off on me. And then also this other thing, like, if I start to unpack, like, the terrors of my past, I'm not going to be able to go forward. So I'm going to leave this behind.
Yeah. I think just one more layer of, like, somberness over this is, at least I have this perception in my head. You know, you forget about Turkish slavery and you forget about Chinese slavery and all these other slaveries, and you're just thinking about, like, the black and native slavery that's going on in the Portuguese and the Spanish and stuff like that. And you forget that it's just like, there's slaves on top of slaves, and God even knows what the hierarchy between them is. But what a mess of a world that we had 100 years ago.
Oh, absolutely.
Just, I mean, it's a mess now, but good Lord, I'm just trying to keep track of what kind of slaves you got going on. Seems like a lot of paperwork for people who couldn't write.
Yeah.
It's a lot to keep track of. They got a lot of weird ranking systems. They're like incels.
Yeah. It's sort of using women's sexual status as how much or little they can participate in the world was very real then. And in this show, they show it in every level of society in this episode, because you see it with Penny right after this. It's absolutely,
not to jump ahead.
And people are trying to perpetuate that now. And the thing is, I don't know how much they're going to get into it, but that sort of disallowing women to participate in society based on their sexual status actually was getting codified this century, in the 19th century.
Yes, because it was the era of science.
Right.
And they proved, quote unquote, that women were inferior to men, and so they couldn't be trusted to own property or think for themselves, or God forbid they vote or wear pants.
We're so emotional, Jamie.
Imagine if they wore pants. It's the end of the world. And we're still 75 years away from women being able to wear pants in public without being arrested, by the way.
Truly.
And I mean that very seriously. 75 years.
If people recognize them as women or acknowledge that they were women. But that's only in this country. There are other countries where if women weren't wearing pants, it was a problem. Wow. So, it's a thing.
One thing you'll never hear me say is that I wish I was a woman. Ever.
After sort of looking at these really screwed up gender politics, fortunately we move on to another healthy mixed sex relationship or not. So yeah, Penny's out to a meal with her father, and
you have skipped something. You have skipped something.
I did it this time. You go for it.
You skipped our reminder that the opioid crisis began in the 19th century because you have young June giving opium to the prostitute that he's just had sex with in the most innocent way, like, oh, this is for your headaches, and the pharmacist said, you just put 2 scoops in a little bit of water or whatever, and she's looking at him like, you are the dumbest bastard I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, see, I thought she was appreciating that. I thought she was like, oh, thanks, that's sweet. I took that as young June being like a pretty okay guy. Like, he enjoys...
Oh, no, I think young June is a pretty okay guy, but I think he was being completely naive and like, he's just feeding her habit, and she's like, oh, yeah, it's for my headaches. Because in every single movie and book about this time period, Every woman is taking laudanum for their headaches. It's always laudanum for headaches.
Oh, I just thought they were sort of like working within the coded language of the time, and she's like, "Thanks, man."
It was literally the very opening scene of Tombstone. And I mean, like, the opening scene of the one woman's like, "Oh my God, I need to go get my laudanum for my headaches." Like, where's the pharmacy?
Yeah. Well, and also the headache thing was also code for menstrual cramps. Like, a woman couldn't admit she was having, like, woman troubles. And so, you missed my air quotes. And so women would claim headaches for all sorts of things that they couldn't talk about in sort of polite society, or, as the saying went, mixed company. And so headache was
if they couldn't go to a doctor and have them masturbate them with one of their newfangled vibrators, then they turned to heroin.
I did mention the heroin tampons. I guess, didn't I?
You did indeed. What kind of world were they living in? I mean, they're just what a world. It's amazing we are here.
It very truly is. Okay, so we move on to like that healthy communicative relationship between Penny and her father, and
oh yes, where Penny is trying to assert herself as a knowledgeable, educated, modern woman and saying, "Look, Dad, I understand you're going through some troubles, and I even know what your troubles are. Could I perhaps help you with those troubles?" And he goes, No, don't worry your tiny little girl brain with this. It's only 2/3 the size of our man brain, and you'll die.
I mean, I did completely involve you in my schemes and marry you off to try to help it, but don't concern yourself with, even though it's kind of ruining your life.
Yeah, and she's like, you literally whored me out for a business deal that's falling through, and you're not going to let me help now? What the fuck?
And it did strike me that, like, even though Mercer's this industrialist, I bet he was a lower rank kind of in terms of size of purses, because when he talks about, I might even lose your mother's house, like, he probably stepped up in the business world by marrying more money.
Yes, this was my original thought regarding, was it him? I think that my guess was that the mayor, oh no, I thought the mayor bought it or married his way into money.
Yeah, and he may have thought he was marrying money too, but he sort of, he grew up more privileged, that he didn't have to scrap his way up.
Right.
And I don't think Mercer really had to scrap. It was just sort of like, how do I go from a guy who does, 2 0 deals to a guy who does 4 0 deals?
Right.
So I like married up.
Or like, for instance, I'm always teasing my wife because she reads a lot of romance novels, and there's nothing but billionaires in the romance novels. Like the millionaires are paupers in these books. So yesterday we were watching a movie about luxury yachts, and this guy was on there, and I was like, this man would be mocked in a romance novel. Like, the standards are so bizarre, but like, this is kind of that, where they're like, it's millionaires versus billionaires, and we're just like, they're rich. What are they bitching about? But they always have problems.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, fantasy. More money, more problems? I don't know.
I guess. That is fantasy. More money, more problems.
Yeah, so after that and Young June's bit, it becomes very clear that there are secrets from Atoy's past that are going to get revealed. Whether they get sort of revealed now or later, I don't know. But I feel like you can see her struggling with facing the parts of her past where she lacked control over her life. And she's like, no, if I didn't have control then, I've got control now, and I am going to exert control now.
I feel like that's Myling's motivation as well as Atoy's. That's why they're gripping on to their power so tightly, and why they won't show any emotion or any, like, and it's kind of the same thing with any minority group has to outperform everybody so much, and never show any flaws, never show any weaknesses. And it's, God, that has to be exhausting, but these women are doing it.
Yes. And you can sort of see occasionally when they get to step off stage, occasionally some cracks will show. But speaking of somebody who has a lot of cracks showing, poor Bill O'Hara.
Oh, Bill O'Hara. And then he has this bounty hunter approach him in a bar and do the big reveal that there is a $500 reward for your heartthrob.
It's $500,000.
Interesting. I thought it was $500. Well, then that makes it a $3 million bounty in 2023 dollars. I thought it was $500.
Yeah, let me find the poster.
That seems impossible because I looked up some bounties. So like Billy the Kid was a $5,000 bounty. Jesse James was $10,000. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid were $30,000, but that was for 2 people.
Okay.
There was a guy named John Wesley who had he had a $4,000 bounty, and he killed 5 guys. So, like...
You mean John Wesley Hardin?
Yes, John Wesley Hardin.
I am distantly related to him.
No, well, your name is Greta Hardin. Holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's wild.
And the funny thing about it is if you look at this period in history, like every 10th guy is John Wesley something.
Okay.
Because it's like, it's naming your kid after this very famous preacher.
Ah.
Yeah.
Oh, is that where Wesleyan comes from?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, okay. I nearly went to Wesleyan, and then I decided I wanted to go to Trinity instead to wrestle.
Okay, here we go. Oh, no, you're right. It's $500. I'm wrong.
Ah, okay.
Okay, this was a funny line. We only drink on days that start with a T. Tuesday, Thursday, today, tomorrow, Tatterday, and Tunday.
That was a pretty funny joke.
But yeah, so those numbers will still stand.
Okay, so a $500 reward would be a $3,000 reward in 2023 dollars. And that also indicates that he is not a terribly wanted man.
Oh, really?
I mean, yeah, because Billy the Kid, $5,000. Jesse James, $10,000.
Okay.
Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, $30,000. Your relative, John Wesley Hardin, $4,000. And he killed 5 guys. So this is really not a pressing issue for the people of Georgia, it doesn't seem.
But on the other hand, $500 is $500. Like, that's not...
Well, it is, but $500 is not going to go far in San Francisco, because although we did adjust the dollars for 2023, like, the inflation in San Francisco was crazy because they were charging 10 times as much for stuff because they had all these minors in it.
True, but this bounty hunter doesn't want to stay in San Francisco. He wants...
No, but when he offers our boy half the bounty to sell out his partner, like O'Hara, he's not really dangling much money in front of O'Hara.
On the other hand, how much is O'Hara on the line for with like Leary and stuff? Like $50. So $100 would solve a lot of problems for O'Hara, and I think that's why Mystery Man knew that he could approach him, because he says, "Yeah, I've been talking to people around town about you."
All right, well, that's fair enough. But it's still, it does not seem to be a terribly pressing issue for the people of Georgia. Although the guy does intimate Dreamy, what is he?
Georgia Jawline.
Old West McDreamy he shot one and stabbed one. So, and it was his own family, his own kin. Yeah,
I did sort of crack up because Mystery Man's like, yeah, I was able to follow his trail, and all I could think is, grow a beard, dumbass. I'm like, you're too pretty. Come on.
Yeah, he really didn't go to any great effort to hide his identity in any way, shape, or form. I mean, just wear a hat. Do anything.
Yeah. So, it's really hard being pretty, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I'm just like, everybody grows a beard. That is one thing I have fun with this show. Like, the actors are clearly not just like all young, overconfident people in their 20s, but their characters are written that way and they're played that way, and I really like that. Like, a lot of their mistakes are made as if they're like these super overconfident 20-somethings, and I think it's just really well done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so after the dun-dun-dun, we get dun-dun-dun part 2 as Penny is getting ready. She's going sort of through this ritualistic thing where she's taking off her jewelry, she's, brushing out her hair, she's slugging back some wine.
So is this like a romance novel thing? Is this kind of like the reverse of Army of Dark or Evil Dead's like getting suited up thing where, where you stay groovy at the end with a chainsaw in your hand? Is this kind of the reverse thing for girls having sex before a romance novel?
Girls having sex when they know they kind of have to, but don't want to.
Oh, okay. So they really are preparing for battle then. They're yeah. All right. They're girding their loins, literally.
Yeah. War. I mean, girls can prepare for sex that they want to have, but they usually have a very different expression on their face.
Boy, but I tell you what an expert in bed My goodness, that man should give classes, should he not?
The,
That man fucked like a walrus. Literally like with his big ass mustache, he might as well have been a walrus.
the fact that when Penny approaches him and he's like, What are you doing? I'm like, man, the marriage you guys have, what communication? What talking?
I don't think there was a lot of talking in the 19th century in marriages. I think it was just mostly men getting drunk and smacking the shit out of their wife and then raping them.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Except in the romance novels, there is a lot of banter. And so that's why I was saying that scene from last episode. I'm like, that's romance novel there. There's the banter, there's the joking. Like, that was the fantasy.
Yeah, because I mean, even when I read about badass women of that era, like women who were lifters and fighters, and like they always married their manager, and their manager always beat and raped them from like 15 to 30 until they finally like put a gun in the guy's mouth and were like, I'm going to kill everybody you ever met if you ever touch me again. And then that guy disappears.
Yeah, and there's a certain amount of that going on with Mai Ling and Ah Toy. Like, these women you're talking about and them as well. Like, as a child, I had so little control over my life. And now that I finally have it, and it takes a while to sort of talk yourself out of that mental cage as well as the physical cage.
Yeah. My God, that was the most depressing sex scene. Genuinely, of all of the like rape scenes in horror movies I think I've ever seen, that one was probably like, it was up there with the most gross.
And the face that the actress makes, I was just like, that is perfectly intense. Just the resignation she has.
Yeah, and she's just looking off into the middle distance like, oh my God, I want to die.
Yeah, thank God. Maybe I should have put more opium in that wine. But whereas Penny's realizing that passivity is the way to getting out of this jam, Young June is the opposite of passive. He's like me last episode. Fight!
He is ready for a blood jam.
Yeah.
I love the word blood jam, or the name blood jam. I hope they keep using it in this show instead of scrap. You ready for the blood jam?
Yes. Well, it's sort of like levels of intensity. A scrap, you just go out there and kind of throw hands around a little bit. Everybody walks away with something, and yeah. So Asam's like, oh shit, this is going to be bad. He goes over to Ah Toy's, and all I can say is, what is up with the guards in Ah Toy's house? Just like letting people walk around into any old room they want to?
I hadn't even noticed that, but I guess that's a good point. Well, when it's these gangsters who they know are kind of affiliated with her, I guess that's not a big deal.
That's true. And so she's in there, looking after the new girl. But Assam is all fired up to, once again, be a bit of a chivalrous dumbass.
Yes.
I mean, in terms of the characters.
Well, I mean, it's nice that somebody's trying to exhibit a little bit of chivalry in between all of the rape and general unpleasantness.
Yeah. And so it sort of builds up to this, like, okay, Assam reveals to Ah Toy that Mai Ling is his sister. So I am convinced that is going to come, like, Ah Toy's going to use that at some point, the way this show's going.
You think?
I don't know. I mean, all Ah Toy seems to do is collect leverage on people, so.
And look evil. It looks like every thought that goes through her head is evil. Somebody dies every second in her mind.
Well, yeah, and the more you learn about her, you understand why she feels that way. But yeah, so Assam finds out where Longzi and Mai Ling are holed up. And so we get to see actual fast running on TV, which isn't that common, and it's really kind of cool, I think, when you get to see it.
And you know what? It's interesting you say that, because one of the things that has always stood out to me in film is in one of the worst movies ever, starring Renee Zellweger and Matthew McConaughey, Texas Chainsaw: The Next Generation. There's one scene where Renee Zellweger runs through the frame, and she runs so fast, you're like, what was that? Like, the second time you see it, you're like, God damn, she must have run track, because you always see people running in that dumbass Matrix style with their hands all like robots. Yeah. It's nonsense. And it's cool to see people haul ass on TV or in movies.
Yeah, and there definitely was happening. We get to the house, and Mai Ling has very practical warlord sleeping attire. I had to congratulate her on that.
Okay.
I mean, because she's wearing like full, sensible pajamas for somebody who needs survival instinct to like jump out of bed and be ready to fight.
I hadn't really noticed her attire. What I had noticed was Penny's robe. And I wanted to ask you about that when we're going back to the sex scene with the walrus.
Yeah, sure.
The robe she takes off.
Yeah.
I mean, trying to describe it to people, it probably has the thickness of like the thickest terry cloth bathrobe you've ever seen, except it was like multiple layers of like chiffon and lace and all kinds of shit. Like, was that pretty?
What the hell was going on? Yeah, I mean, there is definitely a fantasy element to a certain extent, but the idea of sort of having a very thin garment and then a nightgown and then a bathrobe on top of it—that is not insane.
She popped it right off, though.
Well, yeah, and you know, unlike the other one, this one sort of came off the shoulders very nicely. And Sam Blake, what are you doing? That just cracked me up. I'm like, I see that you guys have you generally don't share beds. I see. Okay.
It seems like that was perhaps the first time they had sex.
Or no, not the first time they had sex, but definitely the first time she'd ever initiated it.
Yeah. And boy, did he ever come through with the skill too. Just everybody, if you need any sex tips, check out Walrus Man. And just don't do any of the things that he does.
There you go.
Literally none of them. Don't show up with a mustache would be step one, I think, for any sexual encounter.
I don't know. Some women are into that, but yeah.
Yeah, but there's only one Tom Selleck. There's one Tom Selleck, and he's nearly dead. So let's...
Yeah, and that mustache is kind of push broom territory for sure.
Yep.
So Mai Ling jumps out of bed, and she's got very practical warlord pajamas on because she's ready for, you know, whatever fight is coming at her.
Yeah, because she knows Bolo's outside. Well, she doesn't know that Bolo's outside, but she knows something's wrong. And Bolo's out there strangling everybody with a garrote like he's like an Indian thuggee, just strangling. So when she finally starts going downstairs, there's just heaps of bodies everywhere.
Right, and there looks like there's one of the guards is still standing there, and she's like, "Hey, dude, what the hell?" And then Bolo just pushes the guy down, and is like, "Surprise, baby!"
And then they pan back to Penny, who is pensive in her penthouse, drawing with pen and ink.
Yes.
All the P's.
So I wasn't sure if like Mai Ling and Bolo had some sort of past, or it was just like, oh my God, why are you in my house?
Well, I mean, they know each other because he's, you know,
he's the enforcer,
chief killer for the other side. But yeah, they do. He does seem to give her a knowing smile, but I think that smile was more of a, I've been looking forward to killing this bitch for a long time.
And yeah, I'm perfectly happy with that one. And so we get a little bit of, I felt like it was a really sort of well done, reasonable fight scene. Like, yes, there is no way she is going to overpower this guy, even though she does have a nice long knife.
No, but she is a badass. Like, he hits her with a push kick right out of the gate, and she slams into the wall and comes right back at him. Like, she's a hard lady. And I think it's good that they show that, like, she's at a severe disadvantage here, but she's still getting in her own. It was a cool-ass fight scene.
Oh, the whole thing was great. And then the best flying kick of the series yet.
Oh, yes. And, you know, you don't see many flying sidekicks in Kung Fu. That's really a Taekwondo thing, but he comes in and just smashes Bolo across the room with that kick, and it's dope.
It was beautiful. I went back and definitely watched that one again. And I wasn't sure, like, if Assam was doing this on purpose, but it's clear Bolo was so focused on, like, the actual fighting that he lost sight of the mission. I think if he had just sort of let Mai Ling go, he could have gone in and gotten Long Si.
Yeah, but I mean, the guy's a psychopath, so
yeah,
he's just there to be a mindless killing machine. He's not there to do any thinking.
And so, yeah, once he got kicked in the head by Assam, he wasn't going to let that go.
Yeah, I thought it was fun that Assam started with that jump kick, which you don't see a lot in, like I said, in Kung Fu, and then he went straight into, like, what would be in any Wing Chun martial arts movie. It was all inside stuff. He was keeping the center line, doing low kicks and stuff. obviously acting this out on camera. Nobody can see what the fuck I'm doing. But like, I really enjoy the martial arts displays in this show.
Yeah, I think the fight coordinators really like confined spaces because they stick them in the hallway. I mean, just the whole thing. There seems to be a signature to the fight choreography. I like it. I really like it. But they do seem to enjoy the confined spaces.
Yeah. Well, they make for a lot more fun fight scenes. And you didn't see them a lot in Chinese films up until Jet Li did Return of the Dragon, or Red Dragon it was.
Okay.
Yeah. And they did a lot of infighting in that, and like fighting in bathrooms and phone booths and shit like that. And so then you started to see it more in martial arts films, so it's always fun to see. Because people's heads always get smashed into stuff.
Yeah, and it's a good way to speed up the action. After you talking about Asam's hands, I was watching them in a couple of the more pulled out fight scenes, and he would sort of have them kind of relaxed and open, and then you could see them clench.
Yeah.
That was so cool.
It's such a Bruce Lee thing, too, that you only flex your fist right at the point of impact.
Yeah. Just a quick wardrobe thing. I've been seeing it a couple of times, but the way they're sort of using the same sort of harness stuff that you would use for shoulder holsters for guns, and they're using that for the hatchets. I was like, that is a nice detail, and it looks real badass, too.
Oh, yeah, it's super fun. Fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't, what do they call that? Shoulder holster. It's a shoulder holster, like for a 1970s cop keeping his 38 special in there. Except for a 38 special, it's a hatchet or a knife.
Yeah, no, I thought, because I'd seen them a couple of times, and this time you actually kind of get to see it in action, and I was like, that's a real fun thing. Who knows how real it was, but they make it look damn good.
Well, I think that's also really cool. In any of the old Western movies, whenever somebody pulls the gun from the holster across their body, you know they're a badass. Mm-hmm. Or they pull it out upside down. That's the other move.
Right.
And actually, Assam, now that I think of it, there was a scene where he pulled it out of a shoulder holster and threw his hatchet underhanded in the last episode. It was right at the beginning. He whipped it right into somebody's chest underhanded. So we even got that underhanded cowboy action.
But yeah, it's sort of like they've created this sort of apparatus, and I think they're making the most use of it possible. And again, this is one of those things where clearly they've thought this through, and they're making the fights as much a part of the scenery and weaving it into the story as the dialogue.
It's the show is so rich. They really created a universe. From the slang they had to create because they didn't know what Chinese slang was,
right?
To the dress, to the shoulder holsters for hatchets. It's amazing.
Yeah. So we're going back and forth. It looks like a pretty even fight between Bolo and Assam, but turns out Assam has a second.
Yes. And then she finishes him, which is so gnarly.
When Mai Ling comes up behind him.
Knight of the Long Knives, just stab in the neck.
Yeah, she was like, no, I'm not going to be satisfied with the killing stroke. I got a little more to get out.
Yeah.
And then Assam is just like, she's like, get out.
Yeah, you better go. And then she goes upstairs and kills Long Zi.
Yes, and I sort of I'm going Star Trek here again, but in sort of the Klingon way, like, that was the most warrior death I think Long Zi could hope for at this point. He's facing his successor as she takes him out.
Yeah, that is pretty Klingon-y. I mean, I'm aware that there is a new Klingon versus old Klingon debate raging in Star Trek right now. I don't know where you fall on that, if you like the new or the old, but are their behaviors the same?
I don't know. I am more sort of Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager era, so I'm the middle way, I guess. But not original series. Like, that was just some blackface bullshit.
Oh yeah. I mean, the Klingons weren't really interesting until the Star Trek movies, anyway.
That's true. So I was going back to the beginning of the show, and Long Zi was moaning that the thing he was worried about was a hatchet in the back. And so, Mai Ling does him the favor of, facing him.
Okay.
And in a very sort of twisted way, the fact that he obviously handpicked Mai Ling for something. And it's like, okay, I picked you because you were ruthless and you've proved me right. So, like, he knows he can't get out of it, but so he might as well take what satisfaction he can.
Yeah, and he does that whole mobster thing, I'm glad it was you kind of thing.
There you go.
Yeah, which I find to be absurd, but I mean, I guess if you're going to have last words, you don't want him to be fuck you like everybody else. So, well, he knows that if she can take his wrinkled old dick, she can take anything. So she's the toughest person in the crew. I mean, he genuinely looks like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle that got really, really old and his shell fell off. You know what I mean? Like, he's a gross little old man.
Yeah.
And she doesn't. She kills Long Z, blames it on Bolo, and everybody's happy.
Yeah, for the moment. But we jump to Atoy, and here she is, sort of propping up her business. And this is something you talked about in the last episode, that women, and particularly Chinese women, definitely could not buy property. So she's got this front man.
Chinese people couldn't own property. So, yeah, it was, and then she was a woman on top of it. So now she's having to go through cutouts to purchase property.
So she's talking to the pirate, and he's brought the big important dude in San Francisco, and pirate's gonna pirate.
Yeah, and so one fun bit of history in there was she asks him how this guy got his money, the guy she's using as a cutout, and he goes on to mention a variety of things, and he really quickly mentions he made a bunch of money off the Comstock.
No, I'm
something?
talking about the Holbrook guy.
I've jumped ahead.
I jumped ahead. That was my bad.
Oh.
But yeah, so Atoy's doing her thing where she's like obviously sort of ginning up a bunch of political influence. Oh, councilman, so nice to see you. Have a good time, sir. And then we go upstairs, and there's Holbrook, who, when the pirate brings him in, and he says that, oh yeah, this guy made a bunch of money off of his quarry. And from what you just said, I was like, oh, so that means he's been using coolie labor to get rich.
Right. And so when he said Comstock, I immediately thought Comstock Act of 1873, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but yeah, so the Comstock Act of 1873 made it illegal to send obscene, lewd, or lascivious, immoral, or indecent publications through the mail. And it also made it illegal to possess anything that was considered to be porn.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I was like, how would you get rich off that? But it wasn't that. It was the Comstock load, which was a load of silver in Nevada. It was actually the biggest silver rush in the United States, and it was the second biggest rush of any kind in the United States after the gold rush of 1849 in California.
Yeah, and the Comstock Act was actually used to prohibit the sale of birth control.
We have not progressed as a people at all.
And so if you look at the news right this very second, people are sort of talking about the sort of resurfacing of the Comstock Act.
Oh, yeah, because now they're trying to prohibit the sale of birth control meds through the mail and stuff like that, right?
Right, yeah. So, yay! So, pirate's gonna pirate, and this Holbrook guy is obviously a real creeper. But we leave them for a moment, and we go see the Georgia Jawline doing his own laundry, which is a bit unusual.
Is it?
Yeah, for a guy to be doing... That's kind of weird. Like, first of all...
Well, he's a single man. He doesn't have anybody to do his laundry. There's no woman slave in his house that he can beat up until she does his laundry.
There's Chinese laundries everywhere.
Well, there is that.
But then again, he's frugal. So anyway, I just sort of took it as marking him out as, yeah, a single guy for sure, a super frugal guy for sure, and a little bit of an oddball.
Yeah, he is a bit of a weirdo.
So anyway, it adds to his legend.
Yes.
But bam, 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 in comes Bill O'Hara, and you don't exactly know what he has on his mind.
Well, Bill has just talked to to this bounty hunter, so you're pretty sure you know what it's on his mind.
True, but yeah, he just has this determined look on his face, and the way I took it when he walked in the door, and clearly Lee took it, this is bad. What's going on?
Yeah, there's bad news afoot.
Yeah, and O'Hara confronts him, and he says, "What the hell, man, is up with you being on this wanted poster?"
Yeah, I hear you killed 2 people. And then we find out that Richard Lee is even more of a fucking sweetheart than we ever had any right to believe. The Southern boy, the boy from Georgia, was in an interracial relationship with a freed slave who lived on his property, and his drunk ass racist cousins killed her, and so he killed his drunk ass racist cousins.
And then lit out, as the saying goes. And then one of the best twists.
He did mention that he took his time on the second guy that he stabbed up. He killed with a scythe, and he went in on him. He killed him for a little while after the guy was dead.
Yeah. Once again, somebody with a knife wasn't ready just to be done when the victim was dead.
Yeah. But I mean, to be fair, they did kill his one and only. So
absolutely. And then, like, the first, like, excellent, well, no, I guess the second excellent spoiler of this episode, where the mystery man says, "This ain't gonna end the way you think it is."
Oh, yeah.
As he's pointing the gun at Lee.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, that is such a trope in cowboy movies, too, where, you know, they're pointing the gun at the one person, and then they turn the tables on the bad guy and shoot him instead. So...
yeah. And O'Hara, you're right.
So he busts into Lee's house with all these cops, and you think that Lee's going to jail, and Lee grabs a knife because he's going to fight his way out of it. And O'Hara's like, "Don't be a jackass. Like, you're not going to get out of this." And then they just proceed to beat the shit out of that man. And O'Hara tells him, "You're no longer welcome in San Francisco. We're going to put you on a train. Don't ever come back here. You can be a bounty hunter wherever else you want. You just can't do it here."
Yeah, there was definitely a, like, look, if we're going to have fucked up law enforcement in this town, it's going to be us. We don't need any outsiders coming in here and fucking up law enforcement.
And that was a bold-ass move, given the fact that this is the time when the Pinkertons are really, like, starting to get going, and they are the closest thing we have in the United States to secret police.
I think this is the one thing where O'Hara's like, look, things are complicated enough, and if we start letting bounty hunters come in and sort of mix things up, that's going to make things bad for Blake, and Buckley's going to be pissed off, and I don't need this. I don't need this extra shit on top of all the other shit.
Plus, who's he to moralize? He just beat a man to death over a debt.
Who's haunting him?
Yes, he is haunted by this, that he had to crush that man's skull with his own cane, but he did it.
Yeah, so sort of in the same way Assam got beat into the Hop Way, I sort of felt like this is the blood bond now between O'Hara and Lee. It's like, all right, you know, we've each kind of, you know, given up secrets to each other. So, like, we're connected now. We gotta be there for each other.
Well, except for the fact that that Lee doesn't know that O'Hara has killed that like mob enforcer.
He doesn't know exactly what O'Hara is up to yet, but he's still keeping his mouth shut for him.
Yeah. And he did guard his house while O'Hara was off killing people.
And so it's almost like because O'Hara has this hold over Lee, you know, he might end up revealing a little more to Lee because, like, now I've got a hold on you.
Exactly. Well, I don't know that he has a hold on him so much as, like, now we have to trust each other. I'm keeping your secrets, you're keeping my secrets.
Right. Yeah.
Throw mama from the train style.
Right, yeah, he kind of has, but he doesn't have a hold on him yet, but he has some sort of leverage. Like, if you start ratting on me, I can just throw your ass in jail and collect $500. So, you know.
All right, well, that's the negative way to look at it. I was trying to put a positive spin on it, but all right, negative Nancy, we can go that way.
I'm just saying, it's you know, it cuts both ways. Again, nothing here is simple.
Okay.
I just talk a big game.
Well, I'm never going to engage in gang politics with you. That's for sure. You have you're much more cold-blooded. I'm not built for that.
But yeah, so this is where Atoy is talking with her front man about, hey, there's this, I can't just have all of my assets lying around as a pile of gold in my brothel. I need to invest. I need investments that are going to make me money in other places. And so, yeah, she has to get this front man to purchase land for her and kind of manage her investments.
Yeah. Which had to have been incredibly annoying. Because at any time, there's the possibility that you're going to get ripped off by this person that's fronting for you.
Oh, yeah. No, he could just repudiate her and walk away. I don't think he wants to because, there's good...
He wouldn't survive 5 steps.
That's another reason she needs the Hop Way.
He would make it 4 steps from his betrayal, and then his head would leave his body.
And this is the land that you were talking about that had the interesting history. The guy who had made it big in the Comstock load. But I found it really interesting that, okay, you have a guy who made money in a silver strike, and he managed to invest it once. But anybody who's like taking these crazy chances, of course, he starts investing it in the stock market. And they talk about a crash. And so you've talked about in the past that there was this long depression that was in the US. And so you had these little mini crashes before you had the big one in the 1920s.
Yeah, and for anybody who is a libertarian out there, we've tried libertarianism in the United States, and it failed so spectacularly that we had the Great Depression, and then we said, let's never do that again. So what you're seeing in this tale is the effects of having laissez-faire capitalism, totally unregulated, and no central banking system. And that completely destroyed America's ability to get through any kind of bank rushes or stock market failures, anything. So over time, we gradually put more and more legislation into place that prevented these things. Well, the intention was to prevent them from happening, but then you had derivatives.
And for a long time, the U.S. was sort of stuck in this financial stagnation, and it was a bad international bet. Nobody wanted to invest in American stuff because it could always just like poof, disappear.
Yeah, we were an agrarian society that was pretending to be an industrialized nation and mostly failing at both.
And so the whole reason everybody wants to invest in American stuff is because of this protective legislation that you can't just cause assets to poof overnight.
Yes. Money is actually, it's backed by the government now as opposed to just being out there with banks having their asses hanging in the wind.
Right, which is all cryptocurrency now. I mean, it's just somebody that only has value because somebody says so and some people decide to say so too.
Is there any greater schadenfreude? I mean, aside from seeing 32 federal counts, aside from that, is there greater schadenfreude than seeing crypto people go bankrupt? My God. That FTX kid, I had an erection for a week watching that kid. Well, he went from 12 billion to 1 billion. Well, now he has 0 billion. Well, now he owes 2 billion. I just love watching that.
I mean, the NFT guys fall on their face. That's very fun.
All of it. All of it's so fun.
Yeah. But, that just, So.
To anybody who's listening, if you did lose money in crypto, we revel in your misfortune.
So anyway, Atoy is sort of like, okay, she sort of has things under control. She strolls back into her house and she's like, God damn it. I take my eye off the ball for 1 second and everything falls to shit because the pirate has now taken it upon himself to sell the new girl to Holbrook.
Oh, yeah. And she's not having any part of that. She stabs that pirate directly in the hand and then goes to save her virgin, who is now no longer a virgin.
No. And I mean, and this is the thing that, girls of my generation and before were absolutely infected with. That, once that happens, your fault or not, you are now not as able to participate in society as anybody else. Because it's a sexual assault instead of just an assault, that takes something away from you. If you'd just gotten punched, well, that sucks and you move on. And guys get punched all the time and they just move on. But all of a sudden, something that happened to you affects your future.
Yeah, and again, this is directed at the men because women probably already know this, but I was unaware until last month that Medusa was a very beautiful woman who got raped by one of the gods, of Jupiter, I think.
Poseidon.
Her punishment was a snake head. She got punished for getting raped, which... Yeah. It's just... Punch an incel. Let's punch an incel. Everybody resolved to punch an incel today.
Yeah, and that sort of punishing the victim thing, it's constant.
I loved this, though, because Atoy turned the traditional disfigurement that they did to women for being unclean, especially right. I know it was common with the Utes and the Paiutes in the American Southwest to cut their nose or cut their face, to show that they were quote unquote a whore. Well, she did that to the dude's face who was like banging his virgin, who he had paid for, and she was like, I don't give a shit. Explain that cut to your wife. Go fuck yourself.
And then also her approach with the girl where she's like, enough, you know?
Yeah, well, she definitely has that toughen up. I didn't want to say that at the beginning and sell the ending, but yeah, she really, right. You kind of mentioned at the beginning, she has that real like hard edge. There's a lot of tough love going on.
And I also appreciate for taking a different view than sort of the Christian, like, well, that's your life, that sucks. Instead, it's like, well, a sucky thing happened to you. It happens. I mean, I was waiting for her to say something along the lines, it happens to all of us. So suck it up, get over it, move on.
Yeah. And I know that I have seen that in... There's been a couple of Westerns that I've seen, like modern Westerns, where women actually say that in the film, like, you got raped, who gives a shit? Every single woman on earth gets raped. Fucking suck it up. And I'm like, whoa, Jesus.
And that is a very sort of, that's sort of the opposite attitude that happens. And it would, like, yeah, it would be nice if every fourth woman didn't get raped or sexually assaulted somehow. But to say, this is shit that happened to you, and not something that defines who you are. And I really, really appreciated that.
Yeah, although we've moved away from the sexuality as nothing but an expression of dominance that they had in like the Greeks and Romans, where it was just like, you were either a rapist or a rapee. There was no, it didn't matter, like woman, man, whatever. It was like, who's doing the fucking? All right, you're in charge. Yeah. And it still was pervasive in the 19th century. I mean, sailors, they just got raped. If you were a cabin boy, you were getting raped every day until you could fight well enough to not get raped anymore. And the attitude was, well, yeah, you're a sailor, but suck it up. Same with cowboys. Everybody on the Old West, there weren't any women out there. They were just raping the young ones. Well, he looks pretty enough to rape. Go ahead and get him. And I think that attitude probably wasn't just restricted to women. But again, just, goddamn, the 19th century was something.
Oh, yeah. And so these Christians get very weirded out about different religions and cultures that actually have some discussion of like consent and sexuality and choice and the fact that sex could actually be enjoyable. But it's like, this is how you create a society where it's not just all rape all the time.
Yeah, and this was the era when, because of science, they were kind of abandoning the idea that a woman had to have an orgasm in order to conceive a child, which was a strange way to, I guess, inject pleasure into sex, but also a weird excuse for men to say, oh, well, I didn't rape her because she had a baby afterwards.
Right. Yeah, it's sort of another sort of thing that, could possibly have helped women, but somehow it just got twisted and made worse. But the 19th century was a weird end to, there was kind of an understanding among women that children out of wedlock happened to you either by your choice or not by your choice. And so there was kind of an economy of like how you dealt with these children. But somewhere in the 19th century, I think industrialization plays a role into this because you have more jobs where you like can't take babies with you to work. But these unwanted children become bigger problems.
They also introduced the idea that family was only blood related in the 19th century, I think, or the 18th century, right? Because previously, family was kind of like you could adopt people; they were considered family, and it wasn't. There wasn't the kind of delineation between your legitimate and non-legitimate unless you were super rich.
Yeah, the super richness comes into it. And so I think it has to do with sort of the more regularizing of laws. And so when, again, you have a very sort of limited number of people and, it's just sort of like, well, we can't just let people die. Again, you get more wealth disparity, you get industrialization, you get away from these sort of multi-generational sort of mix and match families that are having to exist, because that's the only way pre-gasoline agrarian work got done, is you had sort of lots of families working together one way or another.
Yep, if you were old enough to talk, you were old enough to get your ass in the field and pick some weeds.
Yes. And so I think, a lot of things are happening that are taking this sort of very strict concern with family lineage away from just the most wealthy, where it's like the inheritance of a ruling title.
Well, that had to do with the rise of the middle class too, didn't it? Where the middle class was aping the upper class.
100% on the nose. Yeah. And then again, you have, wood pulp paper. Now it's easier to keep records, so more records are kept. You have higher literacy, you have more regularizing of laws, and all of a sudden one of the things that happens is that family becomes more restricted.
Okay.
Yeah. I think in America it also became more important to people because in tribal societies, once family was still very like who was around, who needed caring for, what relationships, positive and negative, were formed. And so a way to separate the white person from the red man is like, oh yeah, they're just all family. You don't know who's brothers and sisters and cousins. We're going to be more scientific about it.
Because why not?
Yep. And be more civilized than, the Indians, the red man, these savages. So I think this need to have these like more defined families also came as this sort of superiority reaction that they were going through.
Yeah, the air quotes again.
Oh yeah. But
so many weird levels of politics here. Well, and then we come to the end, which I found from an attire standpoint. This and a weapons standpoint, the final scene was I ran it back over and over and over.
Okay, before we get to that, let's do the morning scene when.
Fine.
No, so we can finish on the fight. But when Mylene comes down to sort of give her speech and say, I'm taking over these works and nobody's gonna goddamn stop me.
And she explains the title, The Tiger and the Fox.
Yes. And that was, I'm sure there's a Chinese story like that, but that's also a Aesop's fable.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. I did not know that. I'm not a big fable person, so I can't say that I know them.
My dad got me the big book of Aesop's fables when I was a kid, and I read them all, back when you had to, there wasn't that much on television.
Oh, I know. I was reading Shel Silverstein over and over and over again, and plus I had Choose Your Own Adventure books, so I was...
Yeah!
Woo, I love Choose Your Own Adventure books.
So did I. Think that's...
For anybody who is young and doesn't know what they are, the reason why you can't make decisions is because you didn't have these books. They were books where you would get to a certain page and it would say you had to make a decision, like you want to go right or you want to go left or you want to talk to this person or you want to not talk to the person or you want to punch them or whatever. And then you would flip to the page that it told you to when you made your choice and the story would continue from there. And it was a really multi-layered story that interconnected. So based on the choices you made, you'd come out with a different outcome and they were phenomenal.
Yes, yeah. I mean, they were video gamey before video games in their own kind of way where you came to a point and you had to make a decision.
Oh yeah, it really was. Right. It was like Grand Theft Auto, but in a book.
Fewer guns. Oh, but yeah, so she comes down and says, hey, you guys were getting a lot of borrowed power from Long Z. Don't get too big heads about it because I am now the tiger and you are all my foxes. And so if you want power, I am the power.
Yeah, I wasn't sure where she was going with this metaphor, with the simile of who was the fox, who was the tiger, and I did not, I didn't see the outcome of her saying that I am the tiger now, and a bunch of you pussies are foxes, and we're gonna figure out which ones and kill you. But then it was also but also we're surrounded by foxes in the other gang, so let's go get them too. It was basically I'm not sure a lot of you are going to survive, was the takeaway I got from that.
Definitely. And there was that moment between Mai Ling and Li Yong when she's like, all right, he's dead. This is going to go. And that look on his face, I was like, is he going to challenge her or is he going to fall in line? And he fell in line.
Yeah, his face, he looked tortured. She was tortured too because she was sad she had to kill the old man and he was sad she had to kill the old man. So
that was a good moment. But then Young-Jun, they see Bolo.
Yes, he has been hung from a lamppost.
Is completely in Hopway territory. And Young-Jun, he's devastated, but he is so ready to go spill some blood.
But Father June's the one who's like, all right, they want more, let's give them more.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the reason why Bolo's dead is because they tried to assassinate, or because they assassinated Long Z and tried to assassinate Mai Ling.
Right.
So, like, they brought this fight to themselves, and he's acting like, well, they've thrust us into this position.
But that's always the way everybody wants to phrase it. I mean, famously, the Kaiser in World War I, he's like, look, I have been forced to attack these people.
Yes, I have been forced to attack my cousin, who we all hate.
Yeah, so, it's a classic gambit, and they're doing it so well.
My cousins and I don't want to attack our other cousin, but damn it, we must.
Yes. And so there was that sweet Gangs of New York callback where we're like examining the arsenals.
Oh, yes. And it's so cool because the Long Z in this scene are highbinders. When they keep talking about highbinders.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. What is that referring to? Highbinder.
It's referring to their queue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so they're dressed in all traditional Chinese outfits, but then with these badass leather dusters on top. Which I just love the look of that. And then they're using, they all have tomahawk hatchets, like they're tomahawk-looking hatchets and long knives. And so these are hatchets that are made for, like, throwing, and they also have very small axe head. And then it cuts to the Hop Way. They're all in black suits with white collarless shirts, a little red pocket square. And they're all carrying bearded hatchets, which are not Chinese weapons. So the highbinders are all carrying stuff that looks traditionally Chinese, stuff that you would see.
Okay, so that tomahawk throwing style, that's also a Chinese design too?
Yep, yeah. And I think when they got to the United States, they were like, oh shit, well this is nice.
I don't even have to import stuff.
Because they used to basically use sawed-off hatchets in China, where they would saw down the handle to make it easier to wield and things like that, and also easier to throw. And so when they show the Hop Way, they're in suits and they have these bearded hatchets.
So what does that mean?
The longer face,
okay.
And those are very European weapons. The only Asians who had bearded hatchets that I could find were the Thai, and I highly doubt they were drawing on Thai influence. I think this was really like, we're establishing we are the new breed. We are the American Chinese, and we're going to fuck you up. And then the old ones are representing China. They're like, this is China making like an imperialist move in the United States. It's kind of how these two they are clashing against each other, I feel like.
I couldn't have said it better. That's what my notes look like. Yeah.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, it's just the two hemispheres colliding in this amazing, beautiful set piece fight.
Oh, yeah. How much did you actually want to see the fight?
Oh, I had to turn my TV off and get up and leave the house so I didn't watch the next episode. I'm not kidding. I had to, because I just get too excited, and I didn't want to kind of like spoil it and start like coming up with great ideas and then forget about them because it's been a week since I like had them. So I was like, nope, I'm going to do it fresh.
Yeah, but that setup there at the end, just like the noise is, you're like, clash.
So good. And it calls back. So I was cutting a promo for the podcast, and all the hatchet men, like I was kind of going back in all the different kung fu movies I've seen that have hatchet men in them. There's so many Ip Man movies where there are hatchet men in them, but even in Kung Fu Hustle, if you look in Kung Fu Hustle, you see them in there. It's amazing. The funny thing is, whereas in the United States, these guys were the guys. Like, they ran shit on the West Coast, and they even sponsored Chiang Kai-shek, like I said, the Chinese nationalist. So these guys were powerful and badasses, but when you see them in Chinese films, they're always getting their ass whipped by some guy with no weapons.
So, yeah, they were the lower status guys in sort of the Chinese ranking of, like, who's a good fighter.
Well, at least that, so all of the Chinese films that you're seeing now are the product of, like, Chinese communism and Chinese nationalism. So the impression is that they're showing is they're throwing off Western influence. And the hatchet men are always in the suits that you see the Hop Way in. Always. And so, so they're throwing off the Western influence that came in from the Opium Wars and, Shanghai and all, like, so all these gangs are coming out of there and all the warlords and things like that. So the Chinese nationalists show people in traditional garb fighting them and defeating them with no weapons. And then here in this, you see the fight happening in an entirely different spin. It's very cool.
Yeah. I can see that. This was definitely my favorite line from Young June, he's like, you can feel the ground shifting under you. And I definitely felt that way by the time I got to the end of this episode. I'm like, well, everything has been turned upside down.
Yeah. And again, the parallels to now are amazing because it does almost feel every day like when you turn on the news, like, holy shit, the world's flipped upside down again.
I think this was my second favorite episode so far after, of course, the blood and the shit and the mini Western. But in terms of storyline, I'm like, this could have been the series ender for like the cliffs that they sprinkled around for us to hang off of.
Well, I'm going to say, right, speaking for every man who's listening to this, the season ender has to be either Assam versus O'Leary or Assam versus
Leong.
It has to be one of those two. It cannot be anything else. Or I will have to fight the show. And I don't want to fight a show. I don't even know how I'd go about that.
No, there was so much to like about this episode, both in terms of fight and also just dealing with the bullshit women are going through. And I was afraid I was going to get more yelly, but no, you're a good guy to talk to about this stuff.
Apparently I get yelly for the both of
them.
Yeah. I was very surprised when I was looking at the recaps on this episode. People were kind of down on it. They said that the dialogue was stilted, it was hackneyed, it was cliche, but the fight scenes were good. And I found that to be off. It was off base, I found.
That's actually one thing I like about this show is they take a lot of our beloved tropes and I feel like they handle them with care and make something beautiful out of them.
Exactly. They take a cliche and put it up on a pedestal and show you how it became one and why it is a good trope.
I mean, I replay in my head for free Young June being thrown through that saloon window in episode 5. That is just such a beautiful picture.
Him just getting his ass kicked in that scene, and then his girl comes to his rescue,
come to his aid. But like that very specific shot of him getting thrown through the window, like in every other cowboy movie ever made, and they just did it.
Yep, they're always back first through the window. I've never seen anybody go through a window back first, but they always do in cowboy films.
Oh, and it was just filmed so beautifully. I love that shot.
It was a phenomenal set piece. That whole episode, I mean, I probably am going to have to go back and watch that again.
Okay, well, I think that was a hell of an episode. We've got another one coming up next week. It is They Don't Pay Us Enough to Think.
Well, that is a good title, and we know what's going to happen. It's going to be the Hop Way versus the Long Z. So, like, it's going to be dope.
Yes. So, where can we find you on the internet, Jamie?
You can find me at plagueofstrength.com or on Instagram at plagueofstrength. How about yourself?
And I am doing the podcast, The History of American Food. We're about to jump into the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812 and how that changes the food scene and sets up a whole bunch of other changes. And we go into a little bit of donkey economics. It's a thrill ride.
Donkey! Let me ask you, I have a question for you. I know what they were eating on the East Coast instead of hot dogs, because we didn't have hot dogs until, 1904 World's Fair. So, we're in 1873, right? They're walking down the street in San Francisco. We're either in Chinatown or somewhere else. And they stop at a street vendor. What are they eating?
At this point, there's not going to be a lot of non-Chinese street vendors in San Francisco just because we're still kind of in a stew-based, fireplace-based kind of economy. So you might have had some sort of hand pie, but it's really just going to be saloons where you got to stop in and get a bite to eat, a sandwich, a bowl of stew, something like that. Or a steak and some biscuits.
Was meat on a stick a real big thing? Like, were they doing satay? It seems like that would have been an easy
so in
food.
Chinatown, you could have definitely gotten some sort of meat on a stick, snacks on a stick, but that kind of...
Or like in episode 1, a fried bird on a stick.
But that was not a food technology that had entered into the Western mind at this point. You would get like a hand pie, something you held in your hands, but not anything on a stick.
Okay.
But yeah, in the Chinese Quarter.
All right.
Yeah.
So empanadas.
Yeah,
they were eating empanada.
You probably
type food.
could have gotten an empanada in San Francisco at that point. They don't show the Mexican Spanish population, but it was definitely there.
Yeah, I mean, they show none of them. There's no native. It's just Chinese or white. It seems like. Well, with the exception of Wankea.
Yeah, and I can totally understand, like, this is the story we're telling, and we don't want to confuse things too much with too many sides, and I respect that, because they are building this very rich story, and, by the time we eventually get to episode 3, who knows how much bigger the world's going to get. Or season 3, how much bigger the world's going to get.
That is true. Oh, before we go, everybody needs to know about this. Nobody ever told me about broken rice, aka Binny rice, if you're in an Indian restaurant or an Indian store. Broken rice is that shit. Have you ever had broken rice?
I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about, because broken rice means about 3 things to me.
Oh, okay. Well, it's called Binny rice or broken rice at my corner shop, and it's really aromatic. So the rice grains are broken. You have to rinse them 3 times before you cook them. And then you use an equal amount of water to rice, which is different than the way you cook rice typically. But the flavor is amazing, and it smells good. Like, it's a way more savory experience than the kind of bland rice that you get when you're eating polished rice.
And again, that's also the variety of rice that they're using. A lot of the basmati type rices are all incredibly fragrant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And with the broken rice, I think it's going to be a lot stickier, because you're going to get a lot more.
It is.
Yeah. You're going to get a lot.
Oh, I love sticky.
Get a lot more starch released than you would if you were dealing with, like, whole grain basmati rice.
Okay. I guess that's why you're supposed to rinse it a couple of times.
You're actually supposed to rinse all rice a couple of times. Typically, growing up in America, we were told not to rinse rice because it was coated with vitamins.
No shit.
And so in America, they're like, no, don't rinse your rice, because you're going to wash all of the artificially added vitamins off, instead of, eating goddamn vegetables with your rice like a civilized person. But all rice you would want to rinse a couple of times to get sort of the excess starch off of it. And then, you have sort of more typical short and medium grain rices, which tend to be stickier with each other. And then traditional long grain rices, which have a different starch composition. And when you cook them correctly, they sort of each grain is separate.
Yeah, I grew up eating dirty rice because my mom's from Cajun. So I never really had...
Which is also delicious.
What's that?
Which is also extremely delicious.
Oh, yeah. Especially if you put a little ground sausage in there. Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
But, so it was just a different experience for me. And I figured I'd just mention it because we're here talking about food and fashion, and that is an Asian food everybody needs to try. It is bang.
It's awesome to hear about. No, we have so much more rice to cover for sure.
Oh, I'm sure you could do an entire episode for us just on rice.
All right. Well, I will see you next week.
All right. Until then.
All right. Bye-bye. We're on Instagram at pcgpodcast. And you can always reach out to us by email at pcgpodcasters@gmail.com. And you can find more dope beats like this one from royalraven.com.